Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tom's Gadget Garage. Today I'm going to be talking about the newly released XPeak 2.0, which is the latest iteration of all-terrain e-bike from Lectric. And this time around it's got a newly designed hydroformed aluminum frame as well as a host of new features. Now recently myself as well as a handful of other e-bike reviewers were invited to Lectric's Phoenix area headquarters where we got an exclusive first look at two of their new bikes, the Lectric XPedition 2.0, which I'll include a link to above, as well as the XPeak 2.0, which we're going to be talking about today. So what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is provide you with an overview of the features of this bike, and then we're going to jump straight into our real-world first impressions ride here on the trails in the Phoenix metro area. So without further delay, let's jump into the details. Alright folks, so the bike that we're going to be looking at today is the XPeak 2.0, which is the new and improved version of the XPeak electric bike. We've got these thick 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires. We've got these fenders that are pre-installed. They do look like plastic fenders, which should help keep the noise level down. Working our way forward, we do have this 750 nominal watt motor, which is capable of cranking out upwards of 1,310 peak watts of power. Right up above here we do have a rear rack that's pre-installed. This has a capacity up to 60 pounds. And then of course, working our way back down, we do have our Shimano Altus gear shift. We do have 8 speeds on this bike, which is an improvement over the 7-speed that we saw on the previous generation. Now another notable change with the XPeak 2.0 is the fact that it's got a torque sensor instead of the cadence sensor. And we did hear from the CEO of the company that they did really work on this torque sensor and pressure so that you still get some of that burst of power that you would expect out of a cadence sensor, but with a torque sensor setup. And then looking over here, we do have these quick release pedals, which are always nice to see, especially if you're going to be packing this in the back of an SUV or something. So working our way up, you'll see we've got our adjustable seat post as well as our standard electric saddle. Here on the bike we do have a key which will allow you to remove and attach this battery here. Now the battery on the XPeak 2.0 comes in 2 flavors, 48 volt 15 amp hour as well as 48 volt 20 amp hour. Working our way to the front, we do have our front fender. Once again, it is a plastic fender which should help with the noise. And then we've got the star of the show, which is going to be the RST Renegade front fork that's got 80 millimeters of travel, so we'll definitely be putting this to the test. Working our way up to the handlebars, you see we've got some upgraded shifter levers as well as locking grips. This bike does have hydraulic disc brakes, and it's actually got an upgraded 203 millimeter rotor up front. As for the rear rotor, it is 180 millimeters. All right, so working our way towards the center of the handlebars, we do have this color display, which is the same display that we see on the Lectric One. And then working our way to the left, we do have our standard 3-button control with the plus and minus button as well as the power button. We've also got a below the bar thumb throttle, which is on the left side, just like the Lectric One. And then of course, we've got our left hydraulic brake lever as well as our left locking hand grip. In terms of lighting on this bike, we do have the Elite headlight up front as well as the lower reflector. And then working our way to the back, we do have a rear tail light, and it doesn't look like there's a brake light option on there, it's just a tail light. And then taking a look at the front fork on this bike, we do have some preload adjustment as well as a lockout and some adjustability settings here so you can set the firmness or softness on the suspension. All right, so that's enough yapping for me. Let's go ahead and take this XPeak 2.0 onto the trail. All right, so we are out and about on the Lectric XPeak 2.0. One thing I will mention about this torque sensor is it's definitely got some power behind it. So if you're moving from a stop and you're in a higher pedal assist level, this thing really does want to take off. But so far, seems like a very comfortable suspension on this bike. The gear shift on this bike is very smooth, very responsive. Right out of the box, I'm not feeling any kind of hang up between gears or anything like that. And then of course here on the left hand side we have our various levels of pedal assist, all the way from pedal assist 1 to 5, 1 being the least amount of assistance, 5 being the most amount of assistance. Got a little hill here. We are in pedal assist level 5. No problem at all whatsoever for this torque sensor. Go under the freeway here, head on over to the trails. Now with this being a torque sensor,
it is a pressure-based system. So the more you put into it, the harder you pedal, the more output you're gonna get from the motor on the bike. And right now, things are feeling really good. So for those of you looking for, you know, a more natural riding experience, torque sensors are where that's gonna be. All right, looks like we got a little bit of a trail here. We got some heat advisories out because it is hot today. It's about 104, 105 degrees right now, so definitely toasty. But this is gonna give us ample opportunity to test this bike out in some extreme conditions. Now, one thing I'll say is it is really nice taking a bike that's purpose-built for these conditions out on these trails. If you've watched my content for a while, you'll know that I took the Lectric XPeak 2.0 out on some gnarly trails. And you know, although it did as good as you can think in that situation, wasn't designed for that purpose. So with the XPeak 2.0, you can definitely feel comfortable venturing off the beaten path. These 26-inch by 4-inch tires definitely give you a commanding feel on the trail. They go over a lot of this gravel and some of the small stuff with ease. For the bigger stuff, that's where the suspension really comes into play. All right, back onto the beaten path. Pedal assist 3, got a hill, bump it up into 4, plenty of power. In terms of suspension, it's definitely very responsive, and I like that they give you some adjustability on there so that you can set, you know, how firm or soft that suspension is. So that'll be important because, you know, depending on your weight, your riding style, the terrain that you're riding on, you may want to make some adjustments. Now, this is a Class 2 e-bike, which means your speed is capped at 20 miles an hour, both in pedal assist as well as throttle only mode. You can unlock it to be a Class 3 e-bike, which will take it up to 28 miles an hour in pedal assist level 5. Throttle, you're still capped at 20 miles an hour. So, looks like we got another trail here. Drop it down to pedal assist 3 for a moment. See how that does. Definitely gonna take full advantage of these gears. And as you can see, this is all medium-sized gravel with some rocks jutting out of the ground. And these 26-inch tires are doing a fantastic job of absorbing a lot of that, and we're putting this suspension fully to the test. All right, up ahead we got some gnarly looking gravel. Go ahead and shift into the right gear. We'll bump up our level of pedal assist. See if we can make it up this. Oh yeah. His bike is powering through, baby. Woo! Oh yeah. Oh, you gotta watch your feet on these rocks. My gosh. I wasn't sure we were gonna make it up that. And we did. Woo! Gonna have to take a breather after that one. So here we are, out in the middle of the unforgiving desert with the Lectric XPeak 2.0. It's definitely toasty. That's our trusty bike that I'm relying on to get me back to my starting point. Here's a quick view of me, foolishly walking around here in the desert in this heat. But anyways, we got plenty of water for the ride. It's gonna be a short one today. Definitely just wanting to maximize our time testing this bike on that gravel path, as well as all of these trails out here. I'm gonna go ahead and walk over here and show you what we just climbed. You know, I don't know how well these cameras pick up these inclines, usually pretty poorly, but this is a steep grade, and that is all gravel, cobblestone, and rocks jutting out of the trail. So really impressed so far with this bike. Wasn't sure I was gonna be able to make it up that. One thing I didn't get the opportunity to do was test out the original XPeak. It was on my to buy list, but now that they're coming out with the XPeak 2.0, this is the one that we might end up with next. But anyways, lots of power. I think the 750 watts so far is more than sufficient. We haven't even gone through the entire gear range yet. So anyways, we'll work our way up this mountain a little more, see what we can do. All right, went ahead and dialed pedal assist back to 2 for this little downhill section here. Looks like we're gonna have more rocks. Bump it up back to 3. Oh yeah. Here we go. All right. All different shapes and sizes of rocks out here on these trails. Having the 4-inch tires definitely helps keep this as comfortable as possible. Heading back down the trail now. All right. Woo! Right up and over. Definitely, when you're riding this bike, just be very aware of your foot placement. You know, you want your feet positioned well on those pedals so they don't drag on the ground when you're going over rocky terrain like this. All right, go. These hydraulic brakes are very effective. All right, back onto the smooth stuff here. Let's head on back down this embankment here and up another very steep hill. Oh, we're gonna have to pedal through this one. Woo! All right. More steep stuff here. Power through that. We are up and over. We are back onto the paved path. Let's see what it's like to ride with this throttle. Very smooth. Appears to be the same throttle they use on the Lectric one with the pinion gear system. But in case all of you are wondering, in throttle only mode, you're peaked at 20 miles an hour. Unless you're going downhill, of course. Then you've got some freewheel action in the mix. Now, if you haven't ridden a bike with 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires, I'll tell you what, you're definitely missing out because it makes for an extremely comfortable ride. Now, one thing I am noticing is that the kickstand, when you go over the rough stuff, does tend to bounce around, and you might have even heard it in the video, but nothing too crazy. Okay, definitely got some rough stuff here. Let's go up and over this here. We'll go ahead and hit up one more dirt trail here along the freeway before we go back to our starting point. Cruising around off-road right now, 15 miles an hour. It's a very smooth ride. Definitely like these tires. Very grippy for riding off the beaten path. And they do a good job at maintaining traction even on some of this crazy stuff. All right, we are back on the beaten path. Now, if you're gonna be riding this bike on roads like this, it's a very plush relaxing ride, like I mentioned before. Kind of cruises around like a Cadillac. All these cracks in the road that you see, you can't even feel them. You glide right over them. So these big 26" by 4" tires in combination with that RST Renegade front fork gives you a lot of cushion.
All right, folks, so there you have it. That was our first impressions ride with the Lectric XPeak 2.0, and all I can tell you is that I was thoroughly impressed with this bike. First and foremost, you've got the 26" by 4" fat tires, which if you haven't ridden a bike with those size tires, it's basically like riding around on a tank because you can pretty much plow over anything that comes in your way. We were riding over gravel, deep gravel, cobblestones, as well as rocks jutting out of the trail, and this bike went over those without any issue at all. The next thing I want to call out is going to be the RST Renegade suspension. It did a really good job of absorbing a lot of the impact in the road, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot of bikes out there in this price category as well as a little bit higher that come with pretty generic off-the-shelf front suspensions, and Lectric actually went the extra mile, as they did with the first iteration of this bike, and put in a quality front suspension, so kudos to Lectric for that. The next thing that I really liked about this bike was the fact that the motor was more than sufficient for anything that we tackled on that trail ride. There was no point in time where I was like, oh man, I wish this bike had more power. 1,310 watts of peak power is more than sufficient for pretty much anything that you're going to come across on the trail. Something else that I enjoyed about this bike is the fact that it does come with that finely tuned torque sensor, which I'll tell you what, when you're riding off the beaten path and you're trying to navigate tight areas, the last thing you want is a sudden surge of power, which is what you typically get with a cadence sensor e-bike. With a torque sensor e-bike, you're going to have more granular control of the power output because it's a pressure-based system. And even though this bike does weigh in at 75 pounds with the battery, at no point on the trail did I feel like it wasn't nimble enough or the size of the bike was hindering me. It was actually absolutely perfect for that type of terrain. One thing that surprised me about this bike is that even though it's got some size and heft to it, I had no issues at all getting up to speed. In fact, when unlocked in Class 3 e-bike mode, I was able to reach a top speed of 27.5 miles an hour as measured by GPS. So very quick for a bike of this size. Now, in terms of areas of improvement for this bike, I did take note of a couple, but before I get into those, it's important to note that these were pre-production models that we were testing out here in the Arizona desert. So between the time of filming this video and when it actually gets delivered to your doorstep, there's going to be a lot of fine-tuning to ensure that it meets Lectric's strict quality standards. The first thing I want to mention, and you probably heard it throughout portions of the video, especially when we were riding on some rougher stuff, there was a knocking in the background. And that knocking sometimes was the rear kickstand, which does tend to bounce around when you're riding over aggressive terrain. But there was another knocking, and it was actually the controller at the bottom of the frame tapping on that aluminum frame, which you can hear in the video.
Level of pedal assist. See?
Now, we did chat with Lectric about this, and this is something they're going to address in the production model. Another thing to mention is that this bike doesn't have a brake light. It's basically got a standard tail light. In future iterations of this bike, I'd love to see a brake light integrated in that taillight assembly. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed riding the Lectric XPeak 2.0 on the trails out here in the Phoenix area. And if you've never ridden on trails before, I highly recommend it because it is extremely liberating. Now, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, happy to address those in the comments section below. And if you decide you want to pick one of these things up, I will include an affiliate link in the description below. If you use that to purchase your bike, it actually helps support this channel at no additional cost to you, and it helps keep the wheels moving on future reviews. I'll also include some links to my review of the XPedition 2.0, as well as two of my first Lectric bikes, which I actually purchased with my own money, the Lectric XP 3.0, as well as the Lectric 1. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into Tom's Gadget Garage. We'll see you next time.